They said the boy would never speak again, not after the accident, not after the silence swallowed his world whole. But then, one rainy night, he drew something. A starving German shepherd, with a jug stuck around its neck, curled in the woods. Everyone thought it was just a picture, until that very night, they heard a cry outside the cabin, and what they found wasn't just a dog. It was a miracle wrapped in fur, breathing its last, yet somehow, still waiting. What happened next didn't just save the dog, it brought a voice back to a broken boy, and reminded an entire town what it means to hope again. Before we begin, would you share in the comments where you're watching from? And if you believe in second chances, love that heals, and miracles that come quietly, type Amen below and let this story touch your heart. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. Autumn had settled over the Ozark Mountains like a soft, damp quilt. The skies above Ash Grove, Arkansas, hung low and dull, heavy with the smell of wet leaves and wood smoke. A faint drizzle had come and gone since morning, leaving the pine needles slick and the forest floor dark and spongy. At the far end of a narrow gravel road, just where the trees thickened and the last power line faded, stood a small wooden cabin, simple, worn, and quietly forgotten by time. Emma Harper stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing dust from an old ceramic mug. She was tall, with pale skin that never quite lost its tiredness, and a kind of quiet grace that came more from endurance than ease. Her auburn hair was pulled into a loose braid, strands falling around a face that had once smiled easily, but now seemed carved by months of holding things in. At 28, Emma had expected to be building a life in a classroom, not trying to piece one together at the edge of the woods. She glanced toward the living room, where her 10-year-old brother Noah sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders like a cocoon. He hadn't spoken in over a year, not since the car accident that killed their parents. His hair, once neatly trimmed, now curled freely under a faded blue beanie. He was small for his age, with pale fingers that moved quickly and precisely over the pages of a worn sketch pad. Emma dried her hands and walked over slowly, kneeling beside him without a word. She'd learned not to push. Instead, she simply sat near, offering her presence like one might offer a chair to someone too tired to stand. Noah didn't look up, but he did pause, just briefly, and held up the drawing he had just finished. Emma blinked. The image showed a dog, a German shepherd by the shape of its body and the pointed ears. Though this one looked thin, its ribs etched sharply under fur that was drawn with jagged, hesitant strokes. Around its neck, there was a strange object, a thick plastic tube or container jammed tight around its throat. The dog was curled up in a patch of leaves and brambles, eyes wide, expression almost pleading. Emma exhaled slowly. "Did you see this?" Noah didn't answer. His hand dropped to his lap, but his eyes shifted slightly toward the wide window behind them. The view outside showed the forest in its moody autumn dress, trees half bare, ground cluttered with red and gold leaves. Mist clung low to the underbrush. Nothing stirred beyond the glass. Emma looked back at the drawing, then at Noah. "It's very detailed," she said quietly. "Very real." Still no response. She gently set the sketch pad on the table and moved to the kitchen to start dinner. Her thoughts stayed with the image, the expression on the dog's face, the way Noah had drawn the fur in ragged lines. It wasn't the first time he'd sketched animals, but something about this one unsettled her. Maybe it was the silence in it. Maybe it was the familiarity. Or maybe it was the way Noah had turned so calmly to the window, as if expecting something to be there. By nightfall, the rain had returned. Soft and cold, it tapped gently on the tin roof and filled the woods with a restless hush. Emma tucked Noah into bed early, pulling the heavy quilt over his small frame. He turned his face to the wall, clutching the sketch pad to his chest. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead and kissed the crown of his head. "Good night, sweet boy," she whispered. Downstairs, the fire had dimmed to a glow. Emma sat in the living room alone, flipping through the sketch pad Noah had left on the table. Page after page of animals, some familiar, others imagined, each drawn with quiet intensity. She stopped again at the dog, the The plastic collar, the curled body, the eyes. Something about it didn't feel like fiction. She walked to the window, arms folded tightly across her chest. Outside, the forest looked like a shadowed sea, swaying gently in the rain. And then, faintly, so faintly she thought she imagined it, came a sound, a soft, broken whimper. Emma froze. It was far from the trees, not the call of an owl, not the bark of a fox. Another pause, then again, barely there. A dog's cry. She leaned closer to the window, her breath fogging the glass. The woods were still, but the sound came again, softer now. Emma's heart tightened in her chest, and upstairs, in the quiet room, Noah lay wide awake, his eyes open, staring toward the trees. A chill lingered after midnight rain, weaving tendrils of mist among the Ozark pines as Emma Harper stepped off the porch, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other. Gravel crunched beneath her boots, the only sound besides the soft wheeze she could now pinpoint somewhere ahead, behind her. The cabin window glowed faintly. Noah, small and silent in oversized socks, had slipped outside and trailed her without a word. Emma's heart hammered. Equal parts fear of the dark and certainty that whatever Noah had drawn was real. 20 yards in. The forest floor dipped, where a storm-toppled white oak lay half buried in damp leaves. Emma swept the beam beneath the arching roots and found him. The German Shepherd was nothing but angles, jutting hips, rib shadows, and a matted coat the color of wet sand. Around his neck clung a grimy 5-quart motor oil jug, its base jaggedly cut away. The narrow mouth gripped his throat like a vice. His muzzle, slick with saliva and dirt, protruded from the opening, gasping. One forepaw trembled, scraping at the plastic before falling limp again. Emma inhaled sharply. Rust scented with rot and old petroleum choked the air. She crouched but kept her distance. Easy. Boy, her voice cracked. The dog's ears twitched. Yet he did not growl. His eyes, ember brown and dulled by exhaustion, slid past Emma to Noah, who had inched closer until moonlight silvered his pale cheeks. Noah lowered himself slowly, knees brushing soaked leaf mold, and extended a thin hand. The shepherd flinched, then, as if hope weighed less than fear, he allowed the child's palm to settle between his shoulder blades. Noah's fingers curled, stroking with hesitant rhythm. The dog exhaled a ragged breath, eyes sliding half-closed. Emma's pulse steadied, though her stomach still knotted. She thumbed her phone awake and dialed the Ozark County Animal Rescue Hotline, posted on the refrigerator. A woman answered after one ring, Martha Leland, the overnight dispatcher whose gravelly voice carried the calm of someone long accustomed to emergencies. Emma described the scene. Starved German Shepherd, oil jug wedged on neck, severe distress. Location just off Miller Creek Trail. Martha's tone sharpened only to confirm details. Stay back. Keep him as still as possible. Team is rolling in 10. Flashlights at the road to flag them. And ma'am, good eyes on that boy. Okay. Emma pocketed the phone and shrugged out of her canvas jacket. She laid it at Noah's side like a blanket offering. Noah draped it over the dog's hindquarters. Tiny movements, tender as dusk. The shepherd shivered, not from cold but from fading adrenaline. Each breath rasped hollow through the constricted throat. Emma noted patches of furless skin rubbed raw by plastic, and the sickly sweet odor signaling infection. Minutes thickened. Rain resumed in whispers, dripping from branches onto Emma's hair. She risked sliding her flashlight beneath the logs to create a dim circle of warmth. Noah sat cross-legged now, one hand on the dog, the other clutching his sketch pad to his chest as though guarding a secret already revealed. In his eyes, Emma read something she hadn't seen since before the accident. Focus, not on loss or silence, but on saving. Headlights sliced through the tree trunks. A white rescue truck. Decals reading OCAR in bold navy. Bounced down the trail and braked at the clearing. Two figures emerged. The first, James Jim Calder, was a rangy wildlife officer in his early 50s, beard peppered gray. Shoulders stooped from decades of carrying tranquilizer rifles and other people's panic. He wore a Park Service parka mottled with pine resin and rain. Behind him came Dr. Lila Monroe, a 32-year-old veterinary surgeon whose red hair, twisted into a low bun, escaped beneath her knit cap, petite but purposeful. She carried a black field kit strapped across one shoulder and walked with the quick, direct gait of someone who believed hesitation wasted lives. Jim lifted a hand in greeting as Emma rose. "You did right calling." His voice was soft but firm, Ozark drawl smoothed by professionalism. He surveyed the setting, eyes lingering on Noah. "Evening. Young man," he offered, receiving only a nod, yet seeming satisfied. Dr. Monroe knelt beside the shepherd, reading the situation in a glance: severe emaciation, dehydration, mechanical obstruction. She spoke more to herself while sliding latex gloves on. Jug's abrasive edge will have cut deeply. Risk of septicemia. She retrieved a small syringe. "We'll sedate lightly. He's too weak for full anesthesia." Emma hovered, arms folded against the damp. "Will he make it too soon to promise?" Monroe replied, prepping the needle. "But yes. If we get that off without tearing more tissue." Jim unfolded a telescoping catchpole, its padded loop slack. He addressed Noah gently. "Son, you're doing great. In a second, I'll need you to step back so we can work." Noah's hand lingered on the shepherd's spine, another heartbeat before he rose. The dog emitted a hoarse whine when contact lifted, but rested its head on Emma's jacket. Monroe administered the sedative into the thin flank muscle. Seconds passed. The dog's eyelids drooped. Jim slipped the loop over the snout and secured it loosely, not to restrain aggression, but to guide breathing if swelling worsened. Monroe eased a gloved finger under the jagged rim of plastic, gauging clearance. Blood oozed where skin blistered. She glanced at Jim. Bolt cutters. Jim fetched heavy-duty cutters from the truck, their jaws dull with age but still potent. He handed them over, then directed his flashlight beam steady on the jug. Emma, standing a pace behind, felt Noah's shoulder press against her hip. He had moved in silence, eyes unblinking, lips slightly parted as if a word might escape. She laid her hand over his beanie-clad head. Monroe positioned the cutter blades along a groove she had scored with a pocket saw. "When I squeeze, hold the jug. Keep it from twisting," she instructed Jim. He braced the container with thick gloves. Monroe exhaled, centered her shoulders, and squeezed. The metal bit into plastic with a crunch. A tremor shook the dog's body. Monroe paused until the sedative kept him still, then reapplied pressure. Another crunch. Deeper. A narrow split appeared. Leaves rustled overhead as wind rose, scattering droplets like whispered applause. Emma's own breath matched the wind. Shallow. Suspenseful. She watched the split widen millimeter by millimeter, the cutters inching closer to the dog's skin. Plastic fragments snapped away, clattering onto wet leaves. Monroe halted, shoulders tense, sweat shining despite the cold. "One more cut and we can spread it." Jim repositioned. The dog's chest moved sluggishly. Moonlight slipped from clouds, bathing the scene in pale silver, as if the forest itself leaned in to witness. Emma realized she had been gripping Noah's hand. His fingers squeezed back, small but steady. Monroe lifted the cutters again, and the chapter's final sound was the steel blades closing on the last unbroken strip of plastic. A sharp clack echoing through the trees, hanging there as promise and peril in equal measure. The steady hum of tires against asphalt filled the rescue truck's cabin as dawn bled pale gold over the Ozark ridges. Inside the open back compartment, the German shepherd lay in a shallow wire crate, an IV line taped to his foreleg and a clean towel cushioning his ribs. A single strip of gauze still circled his neck where the jug had been, already speckled with pink. Dr. Lila Monroe sat beside the crate, knees braced, her gloved fingers resting lightly on the dog's shoulder to monitor respiration. Across from her, Emma Harper gripped the side rail, doing her best to stay out of the way, while Noah perched on the bench seat near the cab window, silent, hands clasped, eyes never leaving the mottled fur. 20 minutes later, the truck rolled beneath a wooden arch that read, Ozark County Animal Rescue Center. The facility occupied a converted dairy barn, red siding washed by early light, twin cupolas venting faint wisps of steam. At the loading bay waited Connor Hayes, A veterinary technician of 25 with broad shoulders, knotty forearms, and a mop of wheat blonde hair that fell into serious blue eyes. Connor's calm, even voice could coax feral cats from corners, and he greeted the team with a nod more than a smile. Night shifts had tamped his expressiveness, but not his patience. Jim Calder killed the engine, stretched stiffly, and swung open the rear doors. Easy lift. Folks. He and Connor slid the crate onto a gurney while Emma and Noah followed. Coats pulled tight against the crisp morning. The reception hall smelled faintly of antiseptic and cedar shavings. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Illuminating kennels lined in neat rows. Dr. Monroe guided the team into Isolation Room 2, a glass-walled suite kept quiet for fragile cases. She adjusted the gurney brake and addressed Emma. "We'll need an hour for initial treatment. You can wait in the lobby, or, if Noah's okay, you may observe from the anteroom window." Emma glanced at her brother. Noah nodded once, clutching his sketch pad. Inside, Monroe and Connor settled the dog, tagged as Rusty. Unknown age, unclaimed, onto a padded table. Connor clipped the remaining gauze and winced at angry, ulcerated flesh beneath, raw skin, grayish ooze, heat radiating through latex. Monroe palpated gently, moderate cellulitis, bordering on sepsis. She murmured, then drew a syringe of broad-spectrum antibiotic and plunged it into the IV port. She attached a saline bag for fluid resuscitation, the drip ticking like a metronome. Meanwhile, Jim completed paperwork with front desk volunteer Martha Briggs, a lively retiree with silver curls and a laugh that overshot conversations. Martha prepared a kennel card, Rusty, German Shepherd, M. then pressed a styrofoam cup of black coffee into Jim's hand, as thanks for another sleepless night. Through the viewing window, Emma watched procedures unfold. Rusty's eyes fluttered, meeting hers across glass for a brief, startling instant. There was no growl, only resignation, and something akin to recognition. Emma exhaled shakily. Beside her, Noah sat on a plastic chair, already sketching. Pencil strokes etched the outline of a dog, this time adding IV tubes and a soft blanket. Small details he absorbed with almost photographic care. Monroe irrigated the neck wound with warm saline until water ran clearer, then applied a honey-infused antimicrobial dressing that smelled faintly of summer fields. "Nature's bandage," she told Connor. They shaved crusted fur around pressure sores on Rusty's forelegs and back, cleaned abrasions with chlorhexidine, and measured body temperature. 103.1 feverish. "He's fighting hard," Connor noted. An hour later, Monroe shrugged off her disposable gown and stepped into the anteroom. Dark crescents shadowed her eyes, but her voice carried gentle optimism. "He's critical, yet stable. Dehydration, severe. But fluids will help. Infection localized for now. We'll run blood panels and keep him on antibiotics. You did the right thing." Emma felt relief settle like warm cloth. "When can we visit twice daily for short periods is best. Quiet, calm, familiarity speeds healing. He trusts you and Noah." She glanced at the boy's drawing. "That's beautiful." Noah lowered his gaze but didn't hide the page. It showed Rusty sleeping peacefully, a soft glow around him. Monroe tilted her head thoughtfully. "Mind if we pin that near his kennel? Animals respond to familiar images." Noah blinked, then tore the sheet carefully along the spiral, handing it over. Days blurred into rhythm. Each morning, Emma drove the winding road to the center. A thermos of cocoa for Noah, coffee for herself. Rusty remained in isolation, though by day 3 his fever subsided and appetite flickered alive. Connor coaxed him to lap fortified broth from a shallow dish, praising every swallow. By evening, Emma and Noah would arrive with folded blankets washed in cabin smoke scent. Monroe approved. Recognizable smells anchored comfort. End-of-shift staff sometimes drifted by. Janice Wu, a petite kennel attendant with cropped black hair and a habit of humming old folk songs, slipped Rusty extra ice chips. Peter LaRue, a lanky volunteer studying wildlife biology at the community college, logged Rusty's fluid intake and scratched behind his ears with delicate fingers still stained by textbook highlighters. Rusty's coat, once dull and caked, began to soften under medicinal baths. Scabs tightened into pink lines, fur regrew in hesitant fuzz, yet swelling of the throat lingered, leaving his bark a silent puff of air. Even so, when he heard Emma's footsteps, his tail thumped weakly. Noah never missed a visit. If Connor offered high fives, Noah politely declined, but he did stand shoulder to shoulder with the tech while Rusty drank. Sketchpad always under arm. One rainy afternoon, a power flicker dimmed lights, startling kennel occupants into nervous whining. In isolation 2. Rusty jolted upright, hackles twitching, eyes darting. Connor knelt, steadying him. Emma and Noah entered moments later, lamps humming back to full brightness. Noah crossed the threshold first. Monroe trusted him now. Glove-free within infection protocol, and laid his small hand on Rusty's collarbone where pulse thrummed. Rusty's panting eased. Emma caught Monroe's faint smile. The bond was medicine in itself. Noah opened his sketchpad to a fresh sheet and began a new drawing. Rusty standing amid tall pines, neck healed, muzzle lifted to dawn light. Emma watched graphite lines carve hope she had dared not voice. 10 days after admission, blood work showed white cell counts edging toward normal, electrolytes rising. Monroe approved brief supervised walks in the grassy courtyard at the back of the barn. Rusty's gait staggered at first, rear quarters weak from muscle wasting, but determination shone. Noah walked beside him, tiny sneakers crunching gravel, holding the end of a lightweight slip lead, while Connor hovered close. Emma snapped a photo on her phone, the first she had taken in months that wasn't paperwork or weathered landscapes. That evening, they returned home to the cabin under a lavender sky streaked with swallows. Emma reheated tomato soup while Noah sat at the kitchen table hunched over his pencils. The fire crackled, rain tapped at window panes. Emma set a bowl beside him and paused, noticing the looseness in his shoulders, the way his brow softened rather than tightened. Hope, she realized, was a subtle muscle learning to flex again. The following morning brought frost so fine it dusted the windshield like spilled sugar. Emma hummed an old art class tune while scraping ice. Noah slid into the passenger seat, clutching a new drawing rolled like a scroll. They arrived to find Monroe adjusting Rusty's bandage. The dog's eyes brightened at their entrance. His tail beat a slow waltz. Emma knelt to stroke him. Noah unrolled his drawing and taped it to the kennel wall. Rusty leaping across a creek. Sunburst behind him. Plastic jug shattered on the shore. Rusty studied the image, ears pricking, as if recognizing destiny foretold. Connor entered with a syringe of anti-inflammatory medication and paused, watching Rusty's reaction. "He likes your art." "Kid!" Noah's cheeks pinked. Emma expected silence, but Noah inhaled, stared at Rusty, and parted his lips. A single hushed syllable slipped out, fragile yet undeniable. Rusty. Time seemed to pause. Connor's eyebrows shot up. Monroe froze mid-note on her clipboard. Emma's breath caught so quickly it hurt. Rusty's ears swiveled and he let out a hoarse, whisper-thin woof, as if trying to answer. Tears stung Emma's eyes. She crouched beside Noah, pulling him gently into her arms. He didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned against her, gaze still locked on the dog. Monroe broke the spell with quiet reverence. First word. Since the accident, Emma nodded, unable to speak. Monroe's eyes shimmered. "Let's mark progress for both our patients then." She tapped her pen against the chart and wrote. Day 11 patient responded to name. Human companion verbalized. Noah knelt, placed a small hand on Rusty's paw, and repeated. Clearer. Firmer. Rusty. The dog's tail thumped twice. Emma felt something inside her lungs unwind, like tight sails catching a long-awaited breeze. Outside, winter sparrows darted along the eaves, voices sharp and bright against the chill morning, singing of simple miracles made real. Early spring tiptoed into the Ozarks with a slow, patient breath. The forest outside Ash Grove began to flicker with soft green shoots and birdsong that sounded more hopeful than bold. Days were longer now. Morning frost no longer bit the ground, and the wind, though still crisp, smelled of wet bark and wildflowers. At the Ozark County Animal Rescue Center, Sunlight filtered through wide windows of the east courtyard, scattering over straw-colored fur that glowed warmer with each passing week. Rusty, once gaunt and ghost-like, now stood proudly on all fours, his tail lifting in gentle arcs. His coat had thickened into a copper and ash blend, fuller around his shoulders, though a faint scar remained where the jug once carved a cruel ring around his neck. When he walked, his stride still carried hesitation, but it no longer dragged. Noah was the first to arrive every morning. He no longer hid behind Emma's legs or buried his face in his hoodie. Now, with his sketch pad under one arm and his chin lifted slightly, he would march across the parking lot, boots crunching gravel, calling softly, "Rusty," each time a little louder than the last. The first time Rusty trotted toward him with confidence. Emma had to turn her face so no one would see her cry. Emma had changed, too. She now wore her braid higher, her frame straighter. The tired ache beneath her eyes had softened, replaced by something more grounded. After weeks of steady visits, she'd spoken to Dr. Monroe privately, and then filled out a form. No hesitation in her pen strokes. The word adopt had never felt more right. That morning, as they sat in the courtyard, Dr. Lila Monroe approached with a manila folder in one hand and a clipboard in the other. Her coat flapped gently against her knees, and her eyes squinted in the morning sun. "Emma," she said, passing over the forms. "Congratulations, Rusty's yours." Beside her stood Officer Craig Benson, the facility's animal welfare liaison, a sturdy man in his late 40s with a gentle face and sandy mustache. Benson handled adoption legalities and home checks with the patience of someone who had raised 4 daughters and built birdhouses on weekends. "I stopped by your place yesterday morning," he said kindly. "Lovely porch, solid fence. Rusty's got a good home waiting." Emma signed without blinking. Noah, seated beside Rusty on the grass, looked up, then grinned, an honest, crooked grin that lit his whole face. He turned to Rusty, whispered, "You're coming home," and the dog leaned gently into his side. Back at the cabin, life folded into a new rhythm. Rusty took to his surroundings with cautious curiosity. He explored the modest garden first, stepping around daffodils with the grace of someone learning the shape of safety. Then came the back porch, the fire pit, and the winding trail behind the house where he and Noah would walk side by side, boy speaking in fragments, dog listening in stillness. Each day brought a new word from Noah. Sometimes it was leaf, when he caught one in the air. Sometimes again, when Rusty nosed a stick toward him. One afternoon, Emma overheard an entire sentence, halting and small, but real. "I think Rusty dreams when he runs, on weekends." The trio would visit the center, now as guests rather than patients. Emma baked cookies for the volunteers. Noah brought new drawings to hang by the kennels. Rusty remained a kind of legend among the staff. The jug dog, they called him. But in the quiet corners of the barn, he was just Rusty. Connor Hayes would kneel to greet him, ruffling his ears. And Janice Wu always slipped him a treat when Monroe wasn't watching. One rainy Wednesday, Emma and Noah were invited to the center's small spring gathering, an informal community day with coffee, posters, and a makeshift photo booth. Children petted cats in playpens. Retired farmers in ball caps asked questions about flea meds. At one point, a girl with strawberry pigtails and a missing front tooth approached Noah and asked, "What's your dog's name?" Noah didn't hesitate. "Rusty," he said. "He saved me first." Later that afternoon, they returned to the cabin, clothes damp, cheeks flushed from laughter. As the rain slowed and the sun pushed through, Noah and Rusty ran through the yard, circling the garden beds. Emma sat on the porch step, her sketchbook open but untouched. She watched as Rusty bounded after Noah, never too fast, always just close enough to make it a game. Rusty paused at one point, chest heaving, tongue hanging to one side. Noah slowed, crouched beside him, and whispered something no one else could hear. Rusty rested his head on the boy's shoulder in reply. That evening, as golden light filtered through pine boughs, Emma stood at the edge of the yard. She saw them, boy and dog, as two pieces once broken, now fitted quietly back together. There was no spectacle in their healing, just walks in the woods, shared silences. words returning one by one. Inside the cabin, the fire cracked, soup simmered, and on the mantel above the hearth, Emma placed a new drawing from Noah. Rusty curled up beside a boot, eyes half closed, with a caption scrawled in wobbly pencil. Home. The town hall in Ash Grove, Arkansas, hadn't seen a crowd that large in years, tucked just behind the post office and painted in the same flaking shade of white. The old clapboard building usually held gardening clubs, retirement potlucks, or Monday night bingo, but on this spring Saturday, the wooden floors trembled under the shuffle of neighbors and strangers, all drawn by a hand-painted sign out front. Hearts for Paws, a community art event in honor of Rusty. Inside, string lights draped across rafters cast a warm glow over rows of easels and display boards. Children giggled near watercolor cats. Teens posed beside charcoal owls. Adults wandered quietly, drawn to the details in every brushstroke. The scent of lemon cookies and fresh coffee mingled in the air. Near the back, a large canvas stood alone beneath a beam of sunlight. Noah's centerpiece. The painting was titled Rusty in the Light. Bold strokes of ochre and amber caught the German shepherd mid-stride, running through tall grass. Ears flared with motion, eyes lifted to the sky. The collar scar was visible, but it had been softened, almost woven into light. In the bottom corner, barely visible, were the initials NH traced in Noah's careful hand. Noah himself stood nearby, a clean-collared shirt tucked neatly into his jeans, his hair combed to the side. He still didn't love crowds, and his hands fidgeted with a paperclip in his pocket, but his shoulders were squared, and his gaze never drifted from the painting. Rusty sat beside him, tail thumping now and then against the wooden floor. He wore no leash. He didn't need one, and his eyes scanned the room, alert but content, like he knew this gathering had something to do with him. Emma stood at the front, arranging the final clipboard for donations. Her blue dress matched her eyes, and the way she carried herself had changed entirely from months before, straighter, lighter. She nodded in thanks to Lori Patton, the town librarian, a round-faced woman in her 60s who'd lent folding chairs and manned the raffle table. "This is the best turnout we've had since the Harvest Festival," Lori said cheerfully, handing out name tags and grinning toward Rusty. "And your boy's work. Emma, it's real, it's honest." Emma smiled but didn't reply. Her eyes were on Noah, who had stepped forward at the cue of a handbell. The makeshift stage was only 2 steps high, built from repurposed wooden pallets. Noah climbed slowly, papers tucked beneath his arm. Connor Hayes, who had driven down from the rescue center in a pressed shirt and boots for the occasion, stood off to the side, nodding encouragement. Noah reached the microphone. The room quieted. He looked out at the faces, some familiar, some not. His throat worked, and for a moment Emma felt her breath catch. Then he spoke. "My name is Noah Harper," he began, voice thin but steady, "and I didn't talk for a long time. After the accident, I didn't know how. But then, we found Rusty." He paused. Rusty sat taller, ears twitching. "I drew him before I met him. I saw him in my head, stuck, hurt, with something around his neck. I didn't know what it meant. But we went out. And there he was, like he was waiting." He cleared his throat. People leaned forward, listening harder. Rusty didn't give up. Even when he couldn't breathe right, or eat, or run, he kept waiting. So I drew him every day after that. And then one day, I talked. Because he helped me remember how. A hush hung thick in the room. I made this painting because Rusty didn't quit. He stayed. And because he stayed, I did too. Someone in the back choked back a sob. And then came the applause. Rising, building, not just polite, but thunderous. It filled every corner of the hall. Lori wiped tears with a raffle ticket. Connor smiled so wide his face crinkled. Even Rusty barked once, soft, low, almost like a laugh. Later, as people browsed and donated and hugged Emma and clapped Noah on the shoulder, the sun broke through the cloud cover and cast golden stripes across the wooden floor. Rusty. now a symbol of something unspoken but deeply felt, lay curled near the painting, head resting on his front paws, eyes half closed as if listening to every sound. Outside, the grass swayed under the breeze, and when the event finally ended, and the last chair was stacked, Emma, Noah, and Rusty walked home together beneath a sky lit like a promise. As they neared the cabin, Rusty broke into a sudden run, down the hill, around the old cedar tree, across the path, like a dog remembering the exact shape of joy. Noah chased after him, laughing, breathless, calling, "Go, Rusty, go." Emma stood still, watching them, one boy, one dog, running across the lawn as if there had never been a time of silence or cages or scars. Rusty didn't look back. He didn't need to. He was home, sometimes. The smallest whisper of hope can carry a soul through the darkest of nights. Rusty wasn't rescued by chance. He was seen, believed in, and loved back to life. And in doing so, he reminded a boy who had forgotten how to speak. That silence doesn't mean the end. It just means the miracle hasn't arrived yet. This story is not just about a dog or a boy. It's about the quiet ways God works through broken things, through rain, through drawings, through second chances. When we stop and truly look, really look, we might just witness a little piece of heaven right here on earth. So, if you've ever felt forgotten, if you've ever waited in the dark for someone to come, let Rusty's story remind you. God does not forget. He sends help in the form of gentle hands, soft eyes, and faithful hearts. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs a reminder that miracles still happen. Leave a comment below and type Amen if you believe in second chances. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories of hope, healing, and faith. And may God bless you and your family today with the kind of love that stays.